All right. So it's 7 o'clock on November 12th, 2020. And I'll go ahead and bring this meeting of the City of Albany Parks and Recreation and Open Space Commission to order. So first on the agenda is roll call. Isabel.
Yes. So Commissioner Abbott.
Here.
Commissioner Frank. Okay. Commissioner Martin.
Here.
Commissioner Negus.
Here.
Commissioner Sardinas.
Here.
And Chair Noble.
Here.
Okay.
Thank you, Isabel. So next on the agenda is the approval of minutes, the October 8th, 2020 minutes. Does anyone?
I'm prepared to make a motion that we approve the minutes.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Yes. Commissioner Abbott.
Yes.
Commissioner Frank.
Here.
Commissioner Martin.
Yes.
Commissioner Negus.
Yes.
Commissioner Sardinas.
Yes.
And Chair Noble.
Yes. Okay, next
Sorry.
is public. Oh,
Sorry, Commissioner Frank, is that a yes vote for approving the minutes, or are you saying here that you're here?
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I just jumped on, so I should abstain from. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I'll abstain.
all righty. So next is public comment. So this is public comment for items not on the agenda. Anyone wishing to address the commission for items not on the agenda? Yes, we have Ms. Chen.
Yes, this is Yishan Chen. Let me see whether view options. Oh my God. Hold on a second. I'm sorry. This is first time. Okay, my name is Yishan Chen. I'm not sure that you could see me. I can't figure out. It might take some time.
We can hear you, so you can proceed.
Oh, okay. My name is Yishan Chen. I live on Jackson Street, and I'm actually a licensed landscape architect who has been practicing for 30 years. I have a small design studio in Berkeley, and I also teach at the university. And I was concerned during the construction process for the Albany Hill ADA trail improvement, seeing the construction crew not having a proper staging area for their equipment, and also protection fencing. Therefore, the existing soil was severely compacted. And so it's going to hinder the future replanting its success. So I know the contractor is obliged to address this kind of problem according to typical planting specification to till the compacted area and even bring in imported topsoil for final planting. And so during the summer, I contacted Robert Gonzalez at DPW and expressed my concern and willingness to offer my professional assistance so I could help with perhaps reviewing the city's final punch list and make sure the contractor has fulfilled their contract requirement and make sure our tax dollars are well spent. However, I never heard back from Robert or anyone else in the department. And I really wish that the city, DPW, Department of Park and Rec could be more responsive and transparent about their process and involve residents who is willing to volunteer their expertise for overseeing the project. I mean, why not? And during my conversation with Robert, he also informed me that the final planting will be done by volunteer organized by Margot Cunningham. At the time, I strongly advised Robert not to proceed with the idea of using volunteer to do the planting. I suggest for him to hire a landscape contractor to finish up the final planting so we could take advantage of the professional installation, follow-up watering schedule, and a typical 90 days warranty. So the Albany resident will have a finished project to enjoy. Not like right now, it's totally raw and dusty and look completely unfinished. And so, you know, I like the city, suggest the city to finish out the planting with professional contractor. And maybe even have shrub like toyon that grows well under the eucalyptus. So monarch could have a buffer to fall on, and maybe other native species of grasses, sponge grasses. And not to just experimenting with volunteer work that's hard to organize during pandemic and waiting for those tender endemic species to perhaps take roots and survive slowly in the next 5 years. We don't want to be the experiment of some endemic species stream. And our community want to see the result of our tax dollars spent. Our community.
Okay, Yishan, if you could wrap it up, please. Your time is almost at an end.
Okay, just a couple more thoughts is our community want to see the result of our tax dollars spent. Our community want to have a nice party to enjoy, especially now during this difficult pandemic time. Please give us a beautiful park and have the professional contractor to finish the planting. Thank you.
Thank you, Yishan. And just as a reminder, we have a creek and open space update as part of the agenda. So I think many of these issues that were just brought up are going to be, we'll be able to talk about them as part of that agenda item. So any other members of the public wishing to speak on items that are not on the agenda? All right. So with that, we'll move on to next, which is announcements. Any announcements from staff and commission members?
Yes, staff has one announcement. I wanted to remind the commission that the current term for all members on advisory bodies is coming to an end. And the new term is beginning in December, and anyone who wishes to be considered for the new term needs to apply. The application is available on the city website. Current appointees can serve for an interim term of up to 45 days after the certification of election, which occurs on, I think, the second Monday of December, until reappointed or replaced, whichever is sooner.
I have a question, Isabel. Is the city in possession of the application materials that commissioners previously submitted?
I believe that the applications are kept by the city clerk's office.
Okay.
Yes.
So if one of us wanted to obtain that in order to just utilize that information again, that would be a possibility.
Anne, are you there? I think you can. Yeah, go ahead. Anne.
Yeah, just I don't. It would be a time saver for me to be able to reuse my prior application rather than create it again. And I didn't save a copy of it. Okay.
Second that motion.
You guys can go ahead and send an email to cityclerk@albanyca.org. And then I will check with our assistant to city manager. She's the one that keeps all of them for the city clerk's office. And I will check with her and pull it out.
Okay, that would be very helpful. Thank you. Any other announcements from staff or commissioners? Okay, we'll move on to presentations. So agenda item 5.1, which is the creek and open space update. So I think that Mark and Margot will have a presentation. And then when the presentation is finished, we'll have an opportunity for public comment, and then the commission can provide feedback to staff.
Margot Cunningham is getting upgraded right now, I think, to a participant, and she's going to be doing the bulk of the presentation, and I'm going to jump in at one of the financial pieces on Cornices Creek. But now that I see Margot, I will turn it over to her.
Hello. All right, I'm going to share screen here. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So I'm Margot Cunningham. I'm the Natural Areas Coordinator for the City of Albany. And tonight we'll be discussing vegetation work this past year on Albany Hill, Cerrito Creek, and Codornices Creek, and our plans for the next several months. So here's our agenda. And when we get to Codornices, I'm going to throw it over to Mark for a little bit. He's going to discuss budget and expenses for that area. So we'll start off with Albany Hill. Our work here is guided by the vegetation management component of the master plan for Albany Hill. And here is a map from the plan. This is our alphabet soup of vegetation units here. All the colored property, all the colored sections you see here are city-owned property. And these are the names of the vegetation units, which are based on the major types of plants growing in them. And you'll see a lot of E's, which stands for eucalyptus. So there's a lot of eucalyptus on the hill, obviously. Over here on the north and east side, OW, that's oak woodland. R is riparian. G is grassland. And there is some overlap in these plant communities. These aren't hard and fast lines. Over here on the west side, these are unmaintained open spaces of the condos on Pierce Street. And this whole area down here on the southwest side of the hill is an undeveloped parcel that the city pays a contractor to maintain the fire roads here once a year. Albany Hill is an ecologically unique place for such a small little area. It has a diversity in habitats as well as in plants and animals. And one reason for this is that it's situated directly across from the Golden Gate. So it gets cool marine air. And the hill is also on the East Bay shoreline, so it gets warmer inland influences as well. These conditions allow a variety of plants to grow, which in turn creates a variety of habitats, and that attracts a diversity of wildlife. There are about 130 native plants, some rare and unusual on the hill, over 100 species of birds, and over 150 different types of butterflies, moths, and bees, as well as some interesting reptiles and amphibians, lizards, snakes, salamanders, and mule deer live and breed on the hill. Sorry, phone. So these are the different habitats on the hill. We have meadows, which have a lot of native wildflowers and native grasses. These are on the east side of the hill, as well as other areas of the hill. We've got the oak woodland on the north and east sides, which these are coast live oaks, and there's native plant understory. We have riparian habitat. Cerrito Creek flows just north of the hill, and Middle Creek flows just east of the hill. And then a big component of the hill is eucalyptus with grassland. And then another habitat is scrub, which is a mix of different kinds of shrubs, such as toyon, which is a small evergreen tree with red berries. There's also California sagebrush. And then there's this sticky monkey flower here with this shrub with orange flowers. The most common shrub is poison oak. And you'll see a lot of that. And the scrub habitat grows mainly under eucalyptus. So the vegetation management plan has three main goals: fire prevention, which is a big concern, especially with a lot of houses nearby. So we want to keep the roads clear for fire vehicle access, and we want to bring down the accumulation of downed wood. A second main goal is ecosystem health. There are several native plant communities on Albany Hill that support wildlife, including birds and pollinators. So we want to keep native ecosystems intact and improve degraded habitats. And then a third main goal is access and safety. We want to keep trails and roads clear of debris, overhanging branches, and increase visibility and make areas feel safe and open for people. And all three of these goals are interrelated. So when you improve one, you improve the others. Here's a page from the detailed action plan in the Albany Hill Plan. And each vegetation unit has a set of tasks for work to do on the hill. And we've been using this as a guideline for our work on the hill. Since much of the vegetation work we do involves removing invasive plants, here is a definition of invasive plants. The California Invasive Plant Council defines invasive plants as plants that are not native to an environment, and once introduced, they establish, quickly reproduce and spread, and cause harm to the environment, economy, or human health. And there are about as many non-native as native plants on the hill, and many are invasive. They create fire hazards, they compete with native plants, and they degrade habitat for wildlife. When we do work on the hill, we're not able to remove every single individual invasive plant, but we put dents in their populations. Most invasives that we remove, they started in the horticultural or landscape trade and escaped from gardens. Some examples are ivy, acacia, cotoneaster, Himalayan blackberry, pampas grass. The eucalyptus were planted as a buffer by dynamite companies on the west side of the hill in the late 1800s. And then another kind of invasive plant, different kinds of thistles, annual grasses, and some other weeds came here with European settlers. Okay, so the work that we did this year, now the pandemic changed our plans, our work plan that we had for Albany Hill and the Creeks. So the shelter in place, it made it difficult to get projects going and approved. But we did manage to do one important maintenance project that the fire department requests yearly, which is the annual fire road maintenance along all the roads along the hill. And our contractor mowed annual grasses, pruned back shrubs and trees, cleared woody debris, and they also removed some invasive French broom, which creates ladder fuels and crowds out native plants. And they cut sprouts from the stumps of large eucalyptus that we had felled in 2018. Planting. We collected seeds and cuttings from Albany Hill natives and then had 2 native plant nurseries, one in Berkeley and one in Richmond, grow over 1,000 plants for us. And after the trail improvement project, we planted natives on bare surfaces, including the slopes above the new concrete wheelchair path, along the scraped areas of the fire road on the crest, the slopes around the Taft and Jackson turnarounds, along the decommissioned trail between Taft and Jackson, along the improved trail from the Madison entrance, and along the Oak Woodland trails where new steps were installed. We had a contractor plant about half of the plants and volunteers the rest. This was the photo here on the lower right. This shows a Friends of Albany Parks event that we had in February. This is just before the shelter in place. And we had about 50 volunteers help us with that. This is one of the plants that we planted. It's called golden aster. It's got yellow daisy-like flowers that are really good for butterflies and bees and other critters. So we had community concerns about the type of vegetation work on the hill. So I want to talk some about strategies for habitat restoration. So one method is called the Bradley method, which was developed by two sisters in Australia. And it's a strategy of you nibble away the invasives at the edges and around natives and allow the native plants to reclaim an area. And an example of where we did this on the hill is in 2017 on the steep slope between Taft and Jackson. There was a huge patch of what's called French broom, which is a terrible invasive shrub that's in the pea family. It's got pretty yellow flowers. So we had a contractor come in and clear this. This is what all these stumps are that you see here. And underneath the French broom are some nice stands of native bunch grasses and wildflowers, such as goldenrod, which you see here on the lower right. So after the French broom was removed, these grasses and wildflowers now have light and water to grow better. And the native bunch grasses are a really good thing about them is that they have long fibrous roots, sometimes up to 20 feet long. So they're good at protecting soil from erosion and sequestering carbon. Another strategy is to plant natives local to the area. And this is what we did after the trail improvement project that had created disturbed areas. Since it takes longer for a native seed bank to reestablish plant populations, and likely many weed seeds will sprout, we planted Albany Hill natives to give the native plants a head start in establishing on the sites. And we plan to plant more this winter, as well as spread some Albany Hill native plant seed. It's best to use both approaches. There's a publication called An Introduction to Using Native Plants in Restoration Projects. It's put out by the Plant Conservation Alliance, which is a public-private partnership with the goal of protecting native plants by ensuring that native plant populations and their communities are maintained, enhanced, and restored. And the author of this publication writes, quote, "Most projects will use a combined approach of active reintroduction and natural return of native plants, because there is no single approach that will fulfill all the needs of a site. Many restoration projects around here use both approaches. Golden Gate National Park in San Francisco and Marin, Garber Park Stewards in Claremont Canyon, Save Mount Diablo. These are just some of the groups that use both approaches." Okay, monarch habitat. So there were also community concerns about revegetation on exposed slopes and disturbed areas created by the Trail Improvement Project, and whether there are enough landing areas for overwintering monarchs, including those that fall from clusters and are immobilized by the cold temperatures on the ground and vulnerable to predation. In the fall and winter, we will spread native plant seeds and plant more natives in these disturbed areas along the Crest Fire Road near the summit. We also had Stuart Weiss, the biologist with Creekside Science, who conducted an assessment of monarch habitat on the hill in 2018, review our revegetation plans and work. And his report was included in the agenda packet for tonight. Some of his conclusions, quote, "The overall plan, species selection, and site selection are solid and represent best practices for native plant revegetation, end quote. He also said that the inclusion of certain species provide fall nectar for arriving monarchs. Because of the thin and often compacted soils, high amount of gopher activity, high human use that causes trampling of vegetation, all of which would make establishing plantings under cluster trees very difficult, Stu Weiss recommended spreading small branches and bark below select overwintering trees at the start of the overwintering season. Temperatures are several degrees warmer, even a few inches off the ground, allowing the butterflies to warm and take flight quicker. And this photo here shows what he's talking about here. This is what we have done up on the hill, spread some bark and branches underneath this cluster tree, which is at the summit. Okay, on to creeks. So here's a creek map of Albany. We have Cerrito Creek on the north with the border between Albany and El Cerrito. There's Middle Creek that flows into Cerrito Creek, Marin Creek, Village Creek, and on the bottom is Codornices Creek, which is Albany's border with Berkeley. So our guidelines for vegetation management on creeks come from 4 sources. We've got the Albany Hill Creekside Master Plan. And then we have a 5-year plan from a creek consultant for the section of Cerrito Creek from San Pablo Avenue to Adams. For Codornices Creek, we have an MOU, which we'll talk about later. And then we have a creeks consultant for all of our creeks. Cerrito Creek, this is the section just west of San Pablo Avenue, which we've had a contractor do a lot of restoration on. And this is an overhead shot showing the section. Here's San Pablo Avenue. And this is Adams Street right here. So this area, it was choked with invasive blackberries, ivy, and other weeds. And a couple of years ago, we worked with a creek consultant to develop a 5-year plan to remove invasive species, plant natives, and maintain this stretch of the creek. And it went through a regulatory process to get approvals. And Urban Tilth, our contractor, has been working on this area since October 2018. Doing a lot of good work, taking out invasives, applying erosion control cloth, planting natives. Codornices Creek. This creek is the most intact creek in the Albany-Berkeley area. It has a population of steelhead and rainbow trout. The section from 8th Street to the railroad tracks was restored between 2004 and 2011. Creek maintenance was neglected by agencies for several years. Friends of Five Creeks has been the only group working there consistently for the last couple of decades. There is now, there has been for the last couple of years, an MOU, which Mark will talk about. Albany's handling the vegetation management currently from 8th Street to the railroad tracks. And that's shown right here. This is UC Village. So here's 8th Street, and it's this stretch down to the railroad tracks. And I'm gonna toss it over to Mark now.
Sure. Thank you. So let me give you some context here. So I'm going to talk about the maintenance plan, more the financing side of it, and just some context. The MOU actually dates back to 2004 and really provided the framework for the phased upgrades of this reach of Codornices Creek. And in that MOU, and again, it's between UC, City of Berkeley, and Albany, we all have very, very distinct roles that we play in it. Each agency has a maintenance component. Albany, interestingly, during the construction, acted as more of the project manager implementation side. And then as we rolled forward, we all have our maintenance responsibilities. Albany's responsibilities are two-phased. We have one sort of big picture responsibility, which we're essentially the banker of the for the MOU. The MOU establishes what they call a maintenance account, and then we all have sort of funding requirements that fold into the maintenance account. And Albany is the holder of that. Then we also have a series of tasks that we do. Some of them are recoverable through the maintenance account. Some of them are things that we just do. An example of that is UC's responsibility is litter collection on both sides of the creek. And I believe they have flood control responsibilities as well. The Albany's responsibility is vegetation management, which we have solely, and then we also have some maintenance responsibilities that we share with Berkeley in terms of trails and so forth. So what I want to do is now kind of step through what we call this maintenance account. Margo, you want to switch to the next slide? So this maintenance account was funded through an escrow account. And I believe the history of this escrow account was there was maybe a land sale related to the creek, and that money was held in escrow and is funding the maintenance activities. So for the purposes of this analysis, I'm showing the initial starting balance as roughly $455,000. And so this is money that the city has taken and we hold now from the escrow account, and we got that in 2018. These expenses predate that a little bit, but but these were all the expenses that are recoverable through the maintenance account. And as Margo said, there was a little bit of a drop off in maintenance responsibilities or maintenance activities out on the creek, and I think that was each agency had a pretty significant turnover in staff. So a lot of the traditional roles people were playing, they just sort of lost touch of it. So what we're trying to do is put together some processes and procedures in place so that we'll have a sustainable maintenance approach, and that it will have a structure that will live beyond any tenure of an individual. So let me briefly run through what the expenses are. In 2016, we spent about $3,300. We spent $3,300 in 20, and I have some detail that I'll go through of each of these. In 2017, we spent about $30,000. In 2018, we actually spent nothing on maintenance work. And 2019 is really when we started picking this back up. And just from a context perspective, Margo is going through all that good work that happened at Cerrito Creek, and that started in 2018. The actual work started in 2018, but really the planning and development of that work started about a year and a half earlier. So it really does take some time to get things pointed in the right direction, everyone working together, understanding what the priorities are and their roles and responsibilities. And I think we see that coming forward in 2019. We spent a large sum of money of $46,000. And then again in 2020, we dropped down a little bit to $12,000. That was partially due to the COVID, which I'll touch on. But that totals through the 2016 to 2020, we spent about $91,000, leaving a little bit over $360,000 in the account. One of the things that's interesting about the account, even though we have a balance, and it's great that this is coming from this escrow account, each agency has a funding responsibility to the maintenance account. When it drops below $50,000, we all need to put money in. And so one of the things I'm focused on is making sure that as we plan out our work in the out years, we understand and we plan in our respective budget processes that what we need to do to fund the account once this money's been expended. So again, having that durable long-term approach to the maintenance piece. So now just a number of slides running through what we spent the money on in each of the individual years. So next slide, maybe. Great. Oh, back one. There you go. So these are the expenses from 2016 through 2018. In 2016, again, $3,300. That was largely vegetation management. We had I think a couple of individuals that we contracted with to do vegetation work along the creek. Again, in 2017, we continued that same process around a little over 4,000. We also had a significant monitoring report. So as I understand, this project was funded through grant money, and through that there was, and I think both the regulators and the granting required different status reports over a period of time. That's different levels of analysis each year. So you'll see some varying spends throughout the years. I believe we're at the end of it or close to the end of it. So this is not an ongoing expense. I think there was a 10-year time horizon, and I think we're right around that point. And then in 2018, we had no expenses. Can I get the next slide? So this is in 2019, we started taking a more comprehensive approach. Actually, it started in 2018, but 2019 was when we first pulled it together. Rather than just sort of an ad hoc, we wanted to have a formalized task list of what we're doing. And this is consistent with what's required in the MOU, where we come out and say what we're going to do, how we're going to, how much we're going to spend, who's going to do the work. And this is something we presented last year. And I'm showing it again, just to show what we've done, and then what we thought we were going to do, and what we actually ended up spending. And some of this is again a work in progress, since these things. My sense is these tasks are going to be very consistent going forward, and and hopefully will fall into a very consistent level of spending. And it ranges from everything from refreshing public spaces to the vegetation management, which is a significant piece of it. And then we have the monitoring component. Task 9, where I have maintenance plan development. We've in 2019, we actually engaged a creek consultant to help us pull the plans together and point us in the right direction. So that was a one-time expense that we think is something that kind of gets us in the right direction, and not something we're going to see year over year. And then there's a couple other things of City of Berkeley put up some signs. They've integrated through their 311 process if there's an issue with the creek, and we have signs that sort of point people in that direction. Because I think what was happening was when calls for something out of whack that needs attention, it was very cumbersome, because the north side's Albany, but it's actually within UC, and then the south side's Berkeley, and who do you call? And the average public person is not going to know that. So Berkeley was kind enough to integrate this within their 311 system. And then we have a process when a call comes in, how that gets sort of expedited and put into the right bucket for the agency to address. And just for here, we projected a spend of about 70,000, and we ended up spending 46,000-ish. One thing to note, I did find some 2018 monitoring costs that I'm showing here in addition to the 2019 costs. You go to and these are finalized numbers for 2019. The next table is the 2020 expenses, and this is the year to date. So I think last year I also presented this table in a draft form of what we expect to spend versus, and then now we're adding in the costs. I just want to make a couple of notes on task 1, task 5. 1 is the public space refresh. Task 5 is a pedestrian bridge maintenance. That's essentially graffiti. I have placeholder amounts almost. They're if you look at the scope, they might need to buy, this is task work that Berkeley will do, but they might need to buy paint or buy decomposed granite, things to have a budget plan for it within the MOU, but those costs may or may not materialize. Probably the biggest monitoring phase 3 monitoring report projecting roughly 17,000. It looks like the costs are coming in around 4,100. Again, these numbers are not finalized, so this is where we're tracking, and this is what our expenses are right now. But I need to confirm that whether that's the end of the monitoring costs. And then Berkeley, again, along with the signage, they're planning to send out to everyone, they've used their GIS, everyone within the sort of the watershed area of the creek, and have some magnets that have the phone number, for the 311 phone number, so you can call if there's an issue. So again, if someone sees something, we get notified on it. And so that's in process. We started working on it last year, didn't get it finalized. Again, we have a placeholder amount of what we think it's going to cost for those magnets. And then finally, we get to the third slide. This is what we're projecting for next year. Again, it looks very similar to last year, and my hope is that we do fall into a more of a consistent spend. We have the two placeholder amounts for the public refresh and the graffiti. We're projecting 25,000 for vegetation management along the creek, and again the $5,000 for the magnets for Berkeley, and that totals 40,000. So looking at that spend and the amount left in the account, if we assume, let's say, a $30,000 to $50,000 spend per year, we have a fair amount of years left before we exhaust the money in the maintenance account, which is good, and we're keeping close track on that. And as we spend things down, we're going to come back and annually come back and update you where we are. And as we get close, each of the agencies will start budget planning to make sure that we can fund the activities going forward. That is all I had.
All right, thank you, Mark.
Sure.
Okay, so the vegetation work that we did along Codornices Creek, we did in the summer, and we had a contractor mow grasses along the pathway. They trimmed trees and shrubs and vines, and they removed invasive plants, mainly this stuff here, this bindweed that you see in the top photo with the white flowers. It grows all over, it carpets the ground, and you can see it growing all into the willow trees and everything here. It's a difficult vine to remove because the roots go down fairly deep and it forms a mat of roots. And very few people have the patience to dig up all the roots. So it's mainly a job of clearing it out, and then you have to come back and do it again as it sprouts. This is our work plan for 2021. So on Albany Hill, as I said before, we're going to plant more natives and sow seeds in areas disturbed by the trail improvement project. And we'll have a contractor do this, as well as a limited amount of volunteers because of the pandemic. We're not going to be having big work parties like we used to. We want to do a spring mow, which we weren't able to do this past year because of COVID. And this is where we go in and cut annual grasses and weeds before their seed ripens and falls. And that way we get rid of the next year's crop of weeds. That's the idea. We want to do another annual fire roads maintenance. And we want to do an assessment of potentially hazardous trees near homes and along trails. We want to do a fuel load analysis, which assesses and describes the types of fuels, both live and dead, and their relative fire hazards, and then recommends treatments to reduce these hazards. And we want to do a more detailed monarch habitat assessment on the entire hill. For Cerrito Creek, we want to do continued maintenance and planting. And for Codornices Creek, we want to do year-round maintenance and planting. And towards that end, Urban Tilth they're the nonprofit that has been doing work for us along Cerrito Creek on the stretch west of San Pablo Avenue. They did the annual fire roads maintenance for us this year, and we are pursuing getting a long-term contract with them to do maintenance and restoration on Albany Hill, Cerrito Creek, and Codornices Creek. So Urban Tilth is a nonprofit based in Richmond. They were founded in 2005. They teach local residents about the relationships between natural ecosystems, food, health, and justice. And they directly engage community members in activities that improve their urban environment. They train young adults in a 15-week hands-on course in watershed stewardship called the Basins of Relations Watershed Stewardship Program. They hire exceptional students as apprentices who go to work on restoration and maintenance projects in watersheds in West Contra Costa County and in Albany, including Wildcat Creek and Cerrito Creek. And you'll see their work here. This is the area between San Pablo Avenue and Adams Street, the stretch of Cerrito Creek. And you can see here they're applying erosion control cloth and wattles. This is the Pete's parking lot area. And then in the top photo, they are cutting sprouts from large stumps of eucalyptus. And then another project they did with us is after the trail improvement project, we had them come in and install some additional steps on the Oak Woodland Trail. And now we are ready to take any questions that people have. I put my email address here so that anyone can contact me after this meeting if you have any questions or concerns about open spaces in Albany.
Thank you, Margot, and thank you, Mark. So do any planning commissioners have any questions before we take public comment? And if you could refrain from extended commentary and stick with questions, that would be appreciated. Commissioner Negus.
Unmute.
Oh, you need to unmute, please.
Thank you. I have a question about compaction that's been raised as a concern as a result of the construction, and I'm wondering if that is going to be addressed as part of the work that's happening in 2021.
Yes, that is something that we're going to work on when we do the planting and the seeding this fall and winter, is work on ways to get the soil to be less compacted.
As a follow-up to that, one of the speakers earlier tonight suggested hiring a professional landscaper to do that particular work. Is that something that seems like a reasonable thing to do to you?
Yes, And we did have a habitat restoration contractor do half of the planting last year, and we plan to have a contractor do most of the planting this time around.
But the compacted soil where the staging area was, seems like that's a little more than just planting plants. So I think that was the concern there, is that, and also it seemed like they were thinking that if the contractor hasn't been completely paid yet, that could be something that the contractor would be responsible for. Does that sound reasonable?
I believe the contractor has been paid for the work that they did there. And since we have planted in that area already, so we have to be careful what kind of work we do. We don't want to disturb the plants that are already there. So that's something we have to be mindful of.
Okay, Mark, do you have anything you can add?
Yeah, so we have paid out the contractor on the project. I would maybe draw a distinction between, I think what we heard before of a landscape contractor coming in where we have an established manicured type landscape, not necessarily manicured, but a designed landscape. This isn't that, and we don't have what we would have in a traditional landscape area where we would have a water source and have a maintenance period for that. This is, I think, a much more hands-on approach or organic approach where we do use we do have a design that we're following. We do have some of the work completed by contractors and some of the work completed by volunteers, and it's more of a mix. I think the issue about the compacted soil is legitimate. It's something that we're concerned about too, and we think we can manage it. There is some sort of expectation or thought that also, taking a step back, we did have a hydroseeding component within the contract that we pulled out and we didn't pay the contractor to do, partially because the work ended later in the season than we initially anticipated. And so if we put that down in the areas next to the trails, anything that would have sprouted would have been mowed over by our annual fire protection mows. So the idea was to not take that approach, but then take an approach of sort of a heavy use of natives and as well as the other grasses. I think Margot's talked about having a seed bank of other grasses out there that will sprout up once the rainy season starts. So it's a sort of a longer term approach than just what you would get in, let's say, a designed landscape. But it's not intended as something that once we get it established, I think it'll be more of a natural feel.
Commissioner Sardinas?
I had a question about the areas that are under the eucalyptus clusters where Stu Weiss recommended putting the fuel, or I guess, what is it, just the branches. Is it possible to fence those areas temporarily since they are trampled? You see that often with restoration. It's like an ecologically sensitive area and there's signage explaining that, or even if you were to revegetate to prevent people from trampling it, because it seemed like there was this assumption that trampling would just happen, and there are ways to avoid that. So I wondered if that was considered as an option.
Yes, that is something that we would, I think we can do.
Yeah.
Some kind of fencing and signage. And
we were discussing that earlier this week, and I think that's one of the approaches we're going to take.
I guess my concern, it sounds like adding branches is a great idea in theory, but I think it can get shifted, and it sounded really labor intensive in terms of where to place things and deal with people coming in. And while it does seem really valuable. And I think I'm glad that you guys are doing a pilot to see it. I just had some concerns about like the ladder fuels and things, because I know he said in the winter it would be fine, but if you did maintain piles, then things dry out eventually. And so just thinking through how you can create kind of more permanent structure instead of having to go in over time, I think would be a great idea.
Yeah, the piles, they would only be there when the monarchs are there. So after March, we would disperse all that material, and even when we do pile them up, it's in such a way that it wouldn't pose a fire hazard. We don't want to have, piles up against the trees, and it's pretty sparsely done, and it needs to be replenished every couple weeks. I've noticed it. I'm actually amazed how much the piles that I put there have stayed, the branches and bark, but every 2 or 3 weeks it has to be replenished.
Another thought I just had about this whole question of soil compaction is, have you guys explored adding organic material like compost or mulch to different areas, and kind of what are the barriers to that?
Yeah, that's exactly something I've been thinking about, is some kind of organic compost to help the soil structure. Definitely. That I think that's something that we could do as a pilot project in one area and see how well it works.
Commissioner Martin?
Yeah, I had a few questions. One is the creek fund, or whatever it's called, the shared one between the different agencies. Is that something that can be used on the trail project, which I believe was from 10th to 8th Street?
The creek fund is really it's really a maintenance account. So the idea is, as projects like that get built, it gets folded into the maintenance regime. So it's really the money there is dedicated for maintenance at this point.
Okay. And the 311 sounded like a useful way to get people to the right agency that wouldn't necessarily know who to call up front. I looked it up on Berkeley's website, and it says it, let's see, by dialing 311 inside city limits. So what then happens? I mean, how exact is that triangulation? What if somebody's on the Albany side of the creek and they call 311? Are they going to get through to Berkeley, or is something they're going to get through to some random?
I've called 311 on the Albany side, and I got through.
Yeah, that you're hitting the exact problem we were having, where people were calling, hey, I'm on this side of the creek, I'm calling either Albany, City of Albany, or UC, or on the other side of the creek, you're calling Berkeley, and so they've set it up and sort of driven it through their system that when calls come from Cordnesis Creek, not Berkeley side, it's just creek in general, they get routed to their public works through this process we've set up.
Okay, so people in University Village, if they call, it'll go through
Berkeley.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, that was it.
Any other questions from commissioners? Okay, so at this point, we'll take public comment. So if you wish to comment on this agenda item, please raise your hand within Zoom. So I think Susan Schwartz, you've had your hand up for a while, so why don't you go first?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. Yes, I'm Susan Schwartz. I'm the head of Friends of Five Creeks. We are a almost 25-year-old all-volunteer group founded in Albany. The Five Creeks are the five creeks that touch or run along Albany. You have our letter. I don't want to really go over what's in the letter, particularly since we now have the financial information that we requested. We understand that the stakeholders meeting was not practical in the middle of COVID, so we look forward to that next year. And we again strongly recommend that everyone work for that Creekside Trail, which is what we need to make this wonderful urban amenity what it should be. I really want to talk about positive things tonight. We are absolutely thrilled about the vegetation management. We are thrilled about the prospect of Urban Tilt coming and working on Codornices Creek and their ongoing work on Cerrito Creek. We're very happy about what's going on in Albany Hill. I hope you'll all walk along Codornices Creek and see that transformation for the first time. It is not the first time in many years, veiled by bindweed below 6th Street. In addition to the mowing Margot mentioned, our volunteers pulled it down and have dug an amazing amount. I'm amazed at how much. And I want to say that so much of this work is due to one Albany resident, Alfredo Chinquanco, a longtime member of our board. It's a remarkable thing what one person can do. You do know that because of COVID, we are working in 2s, maybe 3 max. It's not like the big work parties we used to have. We have planted hundreds of plants. We have about 1,000, well over 1,000 more, if and when we get rains that we will be planting. You can see the flags out there. We're, of course, paying for a portable toilet, which has greatly reduced the pollution, to put it politely. Picking up the trash. I'm not criticizing UC's doing a great job compared to what it was, but we're doing a lot of work down there. Put down erosion control cloth where we think it would be needed, and we're keeping an eye on other places. Above 8th Street, where, as Mark pointed out, there's really still very little restoration. We have done really heavy duty pruning, tree removal, limbing up, just to keep that trail open and not scary, frankly. And I think you all know that it's possible that the Coastal Conservancy will approve at least a planning grant for San Pablo downstream this month. So the very exciting things going on. I'm going to take just a few more seconds, if you don't mind, just to say, let's keep up the good work. But I am going to say, just because of some of the discussions tonight, do not ignore volunteers. It was 15 years of our work that brought back Cerrito Creek below Adams Street after it had been totally neglected. 15 years of hard, dirty labor. It's going to be years to bring Codornices back. No agency would pay for what that's going to take. You would not have the maintenance fund if it weren't for Friends of Five Creeks. You would not have that 311 number if it weren't for Friends of Five Creeks. I'm sorry, I'm not a modest person, but we really are partners in this, and I would like it recognized. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Let's see. So, Ishan, I think you're next.
Yes, I'm not trying to downplay the importance of volunteers' work, because myself, I'm also a docent at the UC Botanical Garden and help with their propagation effort. And I know how hard it is to ensure the volunteering work meet up to the professional standard, even with the best intention. What I'm trying to convey, the notion here is, why can we finish the planting right now? That rainy season is starting. Why a mixed approach, especially the entry on the Taft and around the immediate improvement areas is tremble because it does not look finished. Compacted topsoil was definitely an oversight by the staff, not to hold the contractors accountable, but moving forward, trail improvement projects just totally look raw and dusty and completely unfinished. And I totally agree with the concept of planting California native plants and totally understand it won't be a typical lush landscape project, but it does not need to be an experiment of returning the hill to have only endemic species that would take forever and may not be successful. And I do not agree with the concept to use volunteer to do the replanting right now, because we use it on a regular basis almost every day. And a few years ago, I have helped and volunteered along with my family planting monkey flowers along the creekside with Margot's group. And right now, I think most of the monkey flowers that we have spent 2-3 hours planting are all dead. Not because we didn't try. And just to demonstrate how hard it is, even with good intention and effort planting native plantings, especially endemic species, are not that straightforward since their habitat is totally different today contextually. And as we all know that the climate is changing, so all the contexts are different from the time that those species were successful many, many years ago. So I would suggest the city to finish up the planting with professional contractors and professional installation with warranty, but perhaps with sturdy native shrubs like toyon that grows well under eucalyptus, so the monarch could have a buffer, and maybe other native species like Pacific reedgrasses, ryegrasses, sponge grasses, so our new improved park would look inviting and finished. And not just taking chances, experimenting with volunteers' work, which is hard to organize during this pandemic, and waiting for those tender endemic species to perhaps take roots and survive slowly in the next 5 years. We don't want to be the experiment of some endemic species stream. Our community want to see the results, want to see our textile at work. Our community want a nice park to enjoy now. Especially during this difficult time, we want a beautiful park now that we use almost every day. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Yishan. Some nice Chopin in the back there. So who's next? Carol, you're next.
Okay. Unmuted? Yes?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, fine. Okay, so now do not cut me off. I've been waiting a long time for remarks. So, Margot, I have a question about an area in the oak woodland where you covered with black plastic 3, and I think we're going on the 4th year, and it's still covered with plastic. So what's the status on that? Can you respond to that?
Sure. Yeah, the plastic has been removed.
Totally? Totally?
Yeah, I removed the last vestiges of it last month.
Uh-huh.
So that whole area now is, it just has the branches of the non-native plums that we had cut down there. So the plastic is all gone from that particular area that you're talking about.
Do you think it was successful?
It was. Yeah, the plums are all dead. It took 3 years, but there was a grove of non-native plums and all the stumps and roots are dead.
So when I worked on it, it was ferns and trilliums that came back. And I noticed the trilliums are growing on the opposite side of that path area. But it's not the right time to see them. What do you think about the ferns? Do you think the drought, I just don't see as many ferns in the oak woodland as we used to. Do you think the drought's affecting?
It could be.
That or what?
Yeah, it could be. I see a lot of ferns around.
Mm-hmm.
I know the trilliums that you're talking about.
And those expanded. We did no planting. Planting was not a method that we used at all during those years. So it'll be interesting to see if the trilliums come back in that area. I just was, when you've covered something from light for 3 or 4 years, I just wonder what it does to the soil.
Well, the only plants that were growing in that area that was covered with plastic were non-native plums.
It was solid?
Yeah. It had pretty well, because they root sprout, they had just taken over that area, and it was actually a homeless encampment as well. So there was trash and garbage that we cleaned up.
Well, those but those, Barbara Erder used to say those seeds can lie dormant for years. I mean, obviously that's what happened when we rolled back the ivy, and you helped on one of those occasions. The trilliums filled in, and the ferns did without any planting, and it had, who knows how long it had been since they saw the light of day. So it'll be interesting. Okay, so going on, the French broom, you probably noticed, but hopefully in case you didn't, above Jackson Street there's a lot of regrowth going on again. So you need to get on that this year before it gets to flowering. There has been good reports on the increased steps in the oak woodland. There's still two spots that to me are too narrow, and the edge along the downslope is crumbling, and it's not safe, and I think it should be propped up a little. I've mentioned that to Robert, but nobody's gotten back to me.
And so, Carol, if you could try to conclude your comments in maybe about 30 seconds, that would be.
I'm very involved in this, and so I'd like to take a few seconds more.
Okay, yeah, 30 seconds.
Yeah, okay. And so I want to report that the new neighbors on Madison Street are going to take out their ivy. And so I want you to know we never knew whether their ivy spread into the oak woodland or the oak woodland ivy spread into their yard, but that's a real plus that that there's a cooperative neighbor moving in. And another is that I still think that the public gets shut out, that there's no signage up there about our tax dollars. We're at work, Measure R made this happen, and then now all the work that's happening now is because of the last park bond that we passed. And we should promote that in signage. I think that we should have more of these sessions where the public can talk to you than once a year, especially since you don't report back. I mean, Michael Gold and Yishan and myself requested these things that were in Stu's report this summer, and you sat on that report since September, that's the date on it, and never got back to us. The 100 steps that were added that you just reported Urban Till did, we should have, why not just send an email and say we did it? It would certainly improve a lot of the communication.
That's what I'm doing this evening. That is my report.
I know, but this is like once a year, and emails.
So any concluding thoughts, Carol?
I think that I probably have some, but I'm not going anywhere. I certainly agree with Susan that I hope Urban Till includes Albany residents, particularly those on the Hill. We've been working on that hill forever, and we don't want to be excluded when professional groups come in. So, yeah, more later.
Okay, thanks, Carol.
Thank you.
So next, Jeremiah.
Hi, good evening. Committee, this is Jeremiah. I've been spending some time on Albany Hill lately to basically watch the sunset and try to think about my wife, Elaine. And yeah, I noticed there's a lot of dead debris up there. There's some plants that are dying or winterized or something. And also the benches that we sit on are like, the benches we sit on are like, you know those benches that are made out of wood? They've got rebarb. They got rebar sticking straight up, about a half inch or to an inch. And I've sat down and I've sat on a rebar. You know, and those rebar is very sharp. I've taken photos. I should have emailed them tonight. But those benches on that ADA walkway and all those wooden benches up there, there's 3 pieces of rebar that are just too long. You know, my solution is maybe hammer them down. You know, someone from Public Works can take a sledgehammer and hammer that rebar flush with the bench. I mean, did you guys do that on purpose? So homeless people aren't sleeping on the benches up there? Or, because it's really unsafe, right? You got sharp metal rebar sticking out of the bench. I mean, who approved that? Obviously that's overlooked because it's not safe, right? And you're trying to make a fun place for people to go recreation and have a good time and sit on the bench, not get hurt, you know, and there's no bathroom up there. So you hike up Albany Hill, and where do you go to the bathroom? You got to find a tree. I mean, we're human, right? Should we pretend like we're dogs and just go to the bathroom in the bushes? Where does the city expect the residents to go to the bathroom at a public park if you don't provide a bathroom, right? So that's obviously an issue. There's no bathroom up there. And where's a drinking fountain? Right, so you hike all the way up Albany Hill, and you get up there and you're thirsty. You got to catch your breath. And, I'm tired. I sure would like a drink of water. Where's a public drinking fountain? Oh, Albany can't afford one. I mean, I don't know what the game is Albany's playing. Like, it's about the community. So where's the resources? Where's the bathroom? Where's the drinking fountain? Where's the water? You know, where's a safe bench to sit on? I mean, there's a fire hydrant up there, right? So I see the fire hydrant. So there's water. But how are you going to water all these plants up there, the vegetation? You know, I don't see any pipes. I don't see any sprinklers. It's just like Albany Hill is a big fire hazard. And you guys want to spread around more dead branches on the ground to make it even more of a fire hazard? I mean, I guess it's good for the butterflies, you know. But yeah, let's just keep up the work. And yeah, I agree for volunteers. Wherever the lady says that we don't need volunteers in the city of Albany, I think that's wrong. I think we need to push for more volunteers. We need to accept more volunteers. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremiah. So, Fumio. Okay, Fumio, I think you are unmuted now. So we can't hear you right now, so there may be a problem with your microphone. If you could check and make sure everything's working properly. Maybe give you another second. Okay, so we can't hear you if you're trying to speak right now. So if you could maybe check and see what the issue is, and if you've resolved it, you can raise your hand again, and we'll try to give you a chance to provide a comment later if your audio is working at that point. Okay, thanks. And so for speakers who have spoken before, we're going to have to leave it at that, just in the interest of time. So I think with that, we will bring it back to the commission for discussion. And I guess maybe I'll start with a clarification from staff that you're not looking for any specific direction from us tonight. This was an informational presentation, and if we have any comments, you'll accept them, but there isn't any specific direction you're looking for from us. Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Great. Thanks, Margot. Okay, so commissioners, any comments, feedback, additional questions?
Can we try Fumio again? They left.
Oh yeah, so her hand is back up.
Came back, so hope maybe that did the magic and it'll work.
Okay. So can we try active?
Hello? Can you
Hello?
hear me?
Fumio?
Oh, hi.
Oh, great. Okay, we can hear you now.
Yeah. So I'm also volunteering, watering the plants on the Albany Hill. I happen to see they planting the native plants on March, and I usually walk a dog on the hill. So I saw the procedure. I mean the process. I mean the grasses, how it grow, and I saw the the changes. And then I found water. I found plants are drying. So I know Margot is watering regularly, but some are very dry. And then I started to water by myself a little bit, 1 gallon each day, something like that. But still, some plants are dry. So I think it's a good idea to put the sign about the plants. Some people are already known about the project, but most people don't know. And then some people ask me what's going on here. And then I don't think many people know about this project. So the signage will help which plants, what kind of plants are planted, and where the plants are planted. There should be informed, information needed, and then where to contact about more information. The kind of information that really helps for people who are interested. I saw many people interested, so please do that as soon as possible. Maybe I can help to make the sign too, but you should go for it. So that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the comment. So, Commissioner, feedback, questions, comments? Commissioner Abbott?
So I would just kind of put in my vote of support. I don't really necessarily think this is for Margot or well, probably more Mark than Margot, but I do think signage is a good idea to increase awareness of what's going on. I like the idea of Carol's suggestion about, measure our bunny at work, things like that. I know that there's been a long-term plan to standardize, come up with a standard design for signs and throughout all the parks. I don't think that's going anywhere, so maybe we need to kind of take a step forward and just do some kind of ad hoc stuff for the time.
I think that's a fair comment. I think one of the things that this project is sort of lacked, or is more to the interpretive signage or wayfinding and so forth. Maybe that's something we can look at and add in. I think that would help.
And that is something that I was supposed to be on top of, and maybe Ben as well, Chernobyl, as part of the interpretive sign committee. So maybe this is a good time for me to reboot that and try and bring something at one of the next meetings. We got some comment from folks from Friends of Albany Hill, and Margot also provided comments on what could go on interpretive signs, and so that's something that we could provide, as well as just some of the different signs that are available, and then that could go to Public Works for more in-depth exploration. So I will try to do that, and I apologize for not being on the phone.
And I would say that I mean I think the interpretive sign, I see that as kind of a secondary or a second thing. So I wasn't directing my comments at you. I was saying just kind of basic, there's new plants here, be careful, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that informational temporary signage is important related to this, certainly. But I also think that longer term, like now that the project, it should have been something that we addressed a little bit earlier so that it can eventually become part of this project and part of Albany Hill and help people connect to the resources. And so I just want to say it's a great reminder. So thank you. And just generally while I'm speaking, I it does seem like really thorough work, I think, both in the creeks, as Friends of Five Creek expressed in their letter, as well as on Albany Hill. And it's great, whenever we bring up ideas, to hear that you guys have already thought through a lot of them. And so I appreciate the annual update and look forward to continuing to hear more. I do recognize some folks want to have more engagement in what goes on. I'm not sure how that would function, but at least, from what we hear at the commission meetings. I'm appreciative of what you all are doing. So thank you.
Commissioner Martin?
Yes, I also wanted to express gratification to the volunteer groups and the city staff who are working on all these different things. And it sounds like things are a lot more organized and have the funding and all than ever before. And the thoughtful implementation is appreciated. The input from members of the community is also very appreciated. I did want to ask about Jeremiah's suggestions. One is the rebar. I know the rebar goes vertically through the wood to keep it from rolling, to keep the log. Those are log benches that were, I believe that was wood that was cut from the trail to clear the trail. And so I wouldn't think they need to be up through the wood to actually keep them from rolling. Unless that is a policy to deter homeless or something. It seems like those should be pounded in.
Yeah. On that piece, we'll take a look at that. And if they're there to secure the logs to make sure they don't roll, there's actually some base rock underneath them to help secure them in place. And if there shouldn't be anything sticking up, and so we'll have our people take a look at it and address that.
Okay.
I actually noticed that the other day, and I don't think the rebar was sticking up originally, so I don't know what happened. Somehow it pushed up over time. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just you just have to go, like you said, somebody said, and hit it with a sledgehammer.
Punch it in deeper, yeah. And then also watering stations. That's something that we have input in every year for what do you call it, soda tax funds, and so that'll be on an agenda later. But if Mark, if you could briefly just let us know what the situation is with tapping into that water that's already there. Is that something that's not a really big deal, or it's a big deal for some reason?
So let me, the fire hydrant up there might be throwing people off. It's actually a dry fire hydrant. It's set up so that so the last fire hydrant is further down Taft, and this is set up so that the fire department can come, and we're actually working with East Bay Mud to move a hydrant closer, but it doesn't get up to the top of the hill. So this is just a means for the fire department to come in and park one of their pumper trucks and pump out of the last hydrant and pump it to the top of the hill. So there's really no, if you notice down near the gate, there's a red manifold structure. So that's what the outlet of the pumper truck connects to charge that line and deliver water to the top of the hill.
Okay, so the closest water pipe is actually quite a bit further down the hill?
Correct.
Commissioner Martin, any additional comments?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other commissioners wish to comment? Commissioner Abbott?
I just feel like we should really formally recognize the efforts of Friends of Five Creeks and Susie Schwartz in particular. It's been a monumental effort, and I think we all benefit from all the work that they've done for decades. So I certainly am appreciative. And all the volunteers as well. I know that we've had others speak tonight, and we appreciate it all. So thank you.
Right. I second that. And we are all grateful for the work, the effort, and the care that all of the volunteers bring to the city. And we're very appreciative of everything that you do. And I know staff is as well. And that staff is committed to continuing to work with the community and volunteers in an appropriate manner on all of these projects. So thank you. Thank you for all that you do. Okay, any final comments or feedback before we move on to the next agenda item? Okay, with that, we will move along to agenda item 6.1. which is a review of the draft RFP for the Parks Master Plan update. So Isabel, do you wish to provide any
Yes.
remarks on this?
Yes, thank you. So the current Parks, Recreation and Open Space Master Plan was adopted in October of 2004. The plan included the evaluation of community needs, an assessment of existing parks and facilities, and concluded with a 5 to 10 year plan for the enhancements of the city's park system, open space, recreation facilities, programs and services, outlining a clear set of goals, policies, and objectives to direct the work of staff, the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Commission, and Council. The 2004 plan has been used to identify funding priorities and capital improvement needs for the Albany Park system. Many of the projects listed in the master plan have been completed and others do remain unfunded. But when I actually read the current master plan, I was pretty impressed to see how much has been done, accomplished. The city also adopted in 2016 the 2035 general plan that includes policies, goals, and actions to preserve and enhance open space, expand and improve local park systems to keep pace with population growth, and manage and maintain existing parkland, and other recommendations to meet the changing needs and trends. So this, the current plan does not include the new recommendations provided in the general plan. So an update to the Parks Master Plan is needed to provide a new 10-year outlook and vision for parks, recreation facilities, and open space. The plan will be a planning tool that will guide future development, acquisition, operation, and maintenance of Albany parks, recreation facilities, and open spaces in accordance with the city's general plan, and also integrate extensive outreach and collaboration with the community, stakeholders, and city staff in the process. The RFP also includes the inventory of public and private memorials, honors, and other installations on public land. So we would seek a consultant to do that work as well. So the draft request for proposals seeking the services of a qualified consultant has been provided to you as part of the packet. Staff is requesting feedback on the RFP. Next steps will be to seek council approval and release of the RFP with a tentative timeline for release at the beginning of December. And if this timeline sticks, we expect probably to have a consultant on board and begin the process in late March or early April.
Great, thanks, Isabel. Mm-hmm. Any questions from commissioners before we take public comment? Commissioner Frank.
Thanks, Isabel. Just a question. I didn't notice a budget. Is that right? There's no budget listed.
Well, as part of the current the budget adopted by the City Council, there was a $50,000 appropriated for this this effort.
Okay, it's not listed necessarily in here, though, right? So.
No, it's something that I will include when we finalize.
Okay.
The draft, yes.
So my other general questions are, do you already sort of have an idea of who you think would be good to propose on this to, make sure that they know aware of this and, to ask them to submit a proposal if you already know of a good firm that might,
Mm-hmm. No, I'm not aware of any specific firms. We will go through our, listservs that we have through CPRS, and certainly ask. There's neighboring cities who have done a master plan process in the last few years, so we will also seek some of their recommendations and send the RFP directly to those organizations as well. So we'll definitely make a good effort to release the RFP and make sure that it goes, that it's distributed widely.
Great. And just so you know, the reason I ask is I'm usually on the other end, like submitting a proposal. I would, my firm doesn't do this kind, but I think if I just know from a consultant perspective that if somebody invites me to respond to a proposal, I'm much more likely to put the effort in than if I, didn't know that they might, like my work. So it would, if we know one that you like, it would be great to encourage them to propose. Thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Abbott, did you have a question? Mute.
There we go. I clicked on something else. So my question is kind of what you're looking for is here. Just kind of I don't know a whole lot about RFPs, so I'm not sure what I can provide, but I can provide my perspective of what I'm looking, what I would think is important for the project, but I'm not sure that's really what we need for the RFP. So maybe just say a word about the sorts of things you're looking for.
From the commission, as far as feedback, just if you feel like there's, something that maybe I missed or didn't consider that you would like to be considered in the RFP. So general comments are fine. And also just like Commissioner Frank mentioned, to distribute, to make sure that the distribution, so just general comments as you see fit. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, that helps.
Okay.
Okay, other questions before we take public comment? Commissioner Frank?
No, sorry, we're going to talk. So this is just the question period. We're going to then comment. Is that right? I just want to make sure. Okay. No other questions. Thanks.
Any other questions before we, Commissioner Sardinas?
Thank you. The timeline piece, I guess, seems a little vague. I guess I'm wondering, is there, a time period in which you wanted a plan to be completed by, or is that something that you're leaving up to the individual firms that are submitting proposals?
Yes, we're leaving it up to the consultants to come up with their timeline. I think I did mention something in the RFP at some point that we would like to go back to have an adopted plan by sometime in the fall of 2021.
I must have missed it. Great. Thank you.
So the March date you mentioned was when you hope the this consultant will be secured and starting, and then you're hoping to finish in the fall of the same year?
Well, by the time the RFP would be adopted would be in the fall, but I'm envisioning, and that's also going to depend on the consultant, what we get as far as a timeline from them. But I do expect the consultant to come to the Parks, Recreation, Open Space Commission for review of the draft plan a few times, and then a final approval by the City Council, including the recommendations from the Commission. So when I say fall, it's basically adoption by the City Council of the plan, final plan.
Okay, any other questions? Right.
I guess, sorry, I do have one other question. And sorry, I haven't read this in complete detail, but is there a way to, discuss or ask them to specifically discuss community involvement, like where we to continue to have COVID and how they can make sure to be as representative and inclusive as possible, given, a virtual environment, and also, if we are able to do some like in-person stuff, I think that having that distinction or option might really be helpful to have them spell out. And sorry, that was maybe more of a comment.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Yes, I'll make a note of that.
All right, let's open it up to public comment. So Yishan, you're first.
Hi.
Hi.
Could you hear me? Thank you.
Yes.
I think this is a pretty typical master plan project for a lot of landscape architects, and there's a lot of landscape architectural office in the Bay Area, so it's not a problem in terms of finding a capable firm to do a good job. I would advise the city to publish or advertise on LinkedIn, because not every firm is subscribed to an individual city to find the RFP. So that's one suggestion I have. And not to beat the dead horses here, but I like to clarify that I'm not attacking volunteers. Going back to our last topic about the hill improvement, I myself is a volunteer for Friends of Albany Hill and at the Botanical Garden at UC Berkeley. So I understand we are the steward of the city and steward of the land, and it's very much appreciated and it's important. But my point is in particular to this hill improvement project. I guess I'd like to get a response answering why it cannot be done, in terms of the planting right now. Why does it has to wait 5 years with this stretch out, way of planting? This project that the city apparently have funding, right? And I just do not understand that. And why does it need to reserve the volunteering effort for later on when we need to, one of the other speakers talk about, we keep an eye on the plants, come and water it. I think everybody living in the neighborhood will be more than happy to volunteer this kind of work, but at least finish the project, make it look nice. Why is it not possible? And why does it need to take 5 years? I'd like to get some response from the, public work or somebody in the park and rec.
So I think what we'll do, if you could send an email to city staff, then they will be able to respond to your questions, since we're off of that agenda item now. But thank you for following up on that.
Okay. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Jeremiah, you're next.
Guy, thank you very much. Yeah, volunteers are obviously very great. I'm not sure if this is something where the East Bay Regional Park, some sort of management has some sort of consultant or volunteer or somebody that knows about park management. I know we hire East Bay Regional Park to manage, the bulb, to do park management. I don't know if this is necessarily a park management sort of thing, but I'm not sure if we want to bring East Bay Regional Park to Albany Hill, because I really, tell you the truth, don't want them to take over Albany Hill. It's nice having our own public space for now. So yeah, like she said, watering, I'm sure volunteers would love to water, but there's no water up there. I mean, so what? People have to bring their own water to water plants. So there needs to be water access for anybody to help volunteer, or a drinking fountain. Instead of having a fake fire hydrant, a dry fire hydrant, that doesn't make sense. But all right, thank you.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Carol Fitzgerald, you are next.
Okay. Well, I'm really glad to hear that there's a 10-year plan coming up, and certainly I will want to be a part of that when the public is involved. We have a number of issues coming up on Albany Hill that I know I emailed you about, possibly forming an ad hoc group, which we did in 1990, because I just still think that there is some resistance by Public Works to listen to the community. They work for us, not us. And so our wishes for that hill need to really be respected and taken and be part of the planning. And so I'm delighted that this 10-year plan is coming up, and I will be wanting to be a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
You're welcome.
Any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Okay. I am not seeing any more, so we'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission. So I think staff is looking for feedback to the draft RFP. It sounds like the RFP is going to go to the council before it's released to consultants. Is that correct, staff?
Yes, the next step would be to go to council for their approval to release the RFP.
Okay.
And my goal is to go to council at their first meeting in December.
Great. So if the commission has any comments, further questions, suggestions for the RFP, Commissioner Frank.
Well, I'm just wondering about the what we might want to emphasize in the RFP. One, in relation to the Albany Hill, which seems like we just did a big project there. So I'm just thinking again from the lens of a consultant, you might put a lot of effort or draft your budget thinking you're going to have all this open space in the hill to plan out, whereas we've already kind of developed it. So it might be helpful for a consultant to know this is the areas that we really want you to focus on. And, maybe we should, as a commission, talk about, what do we want to say or not say about the Albany Hill, right? So we just went through that process. So I'm not sure so you can tell me though, Isabel, that may be a quick question to answer. And then, go ahead. And
I think, because I think there's a lot of sections that way. If you think of Pierce Street Park also is another park that is underdeveloped and has changed quite a bit since the last plan. And I think that we would encourage any consultant to review existing plans, including the Albany Hill plan. And I always hesitate to put too much in an RFP because I want to see also how consultants respond and the type of research they do. But you will have an opportunity once a consultant is selected to talk with a consultant and talk about the areas that you would like them to focus on and have that discussion so that we can narrow and focus the work of the consultant where we really need it to be.
So what I would love to hear from you, Isabel, and also the other commissioners is if we do want a focus. For me, one interest would be more of the recreation piece and how, just we keep on getting these requests for different recreation, some changes, right? Bocce and anyway, so the other, what we might want to encourage, and the one thing I would love to see from a consultant is how they are able to really maximize recreation opportunities in a location like Albany, where we don't have a lot of land, but we do have high density really in these park areas and walkable, very walkable sort of parks, to just see how they might approach or even have experience working in a city like Albany, where there's a lot of biking and walking opportunities and but also not a lot of space for us to develop out. So that's one thing I would love for us to talk about and see if we can encourage.
Okay. Yeah, and I think what we should do is just sort of go around the virtual dais. I think we're all going to have our thoughts to share. So I think Commissioner Martin.
Okay. Sure. So one question is, there's one of the few open spaces that we seem to have are under the freeway, and so that's is there a way to put in there that, experience with Caltrans a plus, or just to know like what's possible with Caltrans, or is that too much, like wouldn't be part of the scope of their thing?
Well, I think there's going to be an exploration of expanding recreational area through collaboration with other agencies or other agencies that own land in the city of Albany. So I think that would be part of the scope of the consultant.
Okay.
Yes.
And what about like a master tree plan? Is that something that would be the scope of this project, or would just mentioning a master tree plan be the scope of this project?
Right. The master tree plan, I think, is a different plan that will be taken up by the community development department. and I think it's beyond the scope of this effort.
Okay, and then what about let's see, yeah, I guess some input that I wouldn't mind having from them would be, recommendations for the things that we have to come up with every year, like public watering stations. If they're going to look at every open space in the thing, so include that in the, and then also public restrooms. I don't know if is that in the scope of this, to ask them to assess existing and future locations of watering stations and restrooms?
I don't think we went, it was, I don't think it's that detailed, but we do talk about parks amenities. But in my mind, parks amenities meant more like the activities, right? The tennis courts and the playgrounds and stuff. But we can certainly, as we talk with the consultant, mention, mention that they could assess, restrooms and the availability of restrooms. We are mentioning access, pedestrian, bicycle, and parking access. We'd like them to evaluate access to our parks. Mm-hmm. So that's one area we could certainly add when we talk to them, about what does amenities mean, a definition of amenities.
And then I'm wondering what we're expecting to get back from these people. I think Commissioner Frank, touched on that a little bit, as far as like, are we expecting them to look at Ocean View Park and see a clearing there where we had originally designed a bocce court, and then have them just on their own say, hey, you could put all sorts of things here and here's a list, or are we expecting them to look at the tennis courts and say, pickleball is really taking off and you might want to consider, or to say, what, people these days are ripping out tennis courts and putting basketball courts. So, I mean, what are we expecting them to say on these kind of things?
Right. And it's going to depend on who we pick and how they propose to, to present this information. I would say that we, as part of the RFP, we are requiring a extensive community outreach. So the consultant is not going to pick. It's going to be based on an extensive community outreach, and how they provide us with the information, the data that they are gathering is really up to them. But that's also another question that we would ask in the interview process. How do you see your final report? What are going to be the different sections, and how do you plan on providing us clear information?
That's it for me. Thank you.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Sardinas?
A question is, in the document review, is that where they would assess, look at the climate action plan that the city of Albany adopted? Okay, great.
Yeah.
And then just one thing that I think is really important, and I do think that you guys highlight stakeholders, but I really think this is an opportunity to be more representative, to include the whole community, not just the usual suspects. And so being explicit about diversity, equity, and inclusion in this RFP, I think, is really important, and I think represents what we hope to achieve in parks in Albany. And so I think that's not something I necessarily want to leave up to chance and to the individual people who are putting in RFPs. I want to make sure that their process really reaches out to different folks, different voices in all aspects of our community, so that our parks are truly representative. And that's it for me.
Thank you.
I just piggyback on that, because I think that's important, but I think also that wouldn't the consultants mostly be relying on the city to do the outreach, because the city has the email blast, the city can send postcards, the city, what would a consultant from out of town, how would they go to telephone poles and staple flyers, or, what would they actually do to increase outreach? or I guess maybe that's for Commissioner Sardinius. Like, what are you envisioning?
Well, I mean, that's something that I believe that that they should have ability to do. And maybe Commissioner Frank is somebody who can speak to different outreach tools, but I would think that they would use that as well as other like traditional and untraditional forms. And this is not my area of expertise, is developing these plans, but it's certainly something that I know a lot of other cities are trying to do, is more outreach and bringing people in, figuring out different times to hold meetings, different ways to include people who are not usually heard and included. I mean, I also think, talking to all of like the groups, like, at Albany Hill, Friends of Five Creeks, like all of that is important. But I also just think as we imagine how Albany will shift into the future in the next 10 years, how can we make sure that we're capturing, some of those voices that are shifting? So Commissioner Frank, how do you guys do it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say there's lots of different tools out there. So I think, the way the consultants usually work is they would like partner with Isabel for her to give information about who some of the usual suspects are, but also demographic information and other venues. So you could use Nextdoor, you could do social media boosting. There's lots of other tools that you could use that a consultant should bring expertise to the table to suggest. And then in partnership with Isabel would, make sure they're on the right track and reaching those hard to reach. So I would imagine too, Isabel, that the consultant might come to us at some point early in the process just to get feedback on, who we're hoping that they can reach also, not in a super like detailed task list way, but just sort of these maybe even get advice from us about some stakeholders or populations that they should be reaching out to. So.
Yes, because they'll be providing a plan. We're asking them to describe their approach to community involvement. So once we select a consultant is selected, they can come to the commission and get feedback on their approach and augment based on your feedback and make some changes or of things that they may have not thought about. Mm-hmm.
Sounds good.
So any of the commissioners, Commissioner Negus.
Question about the contents of the RFP. You called out specifically doing an inventory of monuments and things like that, which I think is a great idea. We've had a lot of discussion, particularly about dog park, and I don't know if that's something that is at a level that should be addressed in the RFP. Excuse me, not a dog park, I mean a bike park. It should be addressed in the RFP, or if you think that's something that will come out as part of the community involvement process.
Yes, I think it's going to come out as part of the community involvement process, but of course we will also update the consultants on things that have come to the commission and have been, that we redirected to the master plan process.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Abbott,
I'm glad that we talked about reaching into those hard to reach communities, because that is a real challenge and it's something we really need to do. Even somebody's going to have to hang out at the park and see who uses it, because that's basically the way you're going to know. But the one thing I wanted to mention, and this has been kind of a challenge, well, not a challenge, but it's something that the city has had to address over the last 5-6 years, and that's Title IX considerations. I don't know if this RFP is a place where we want to just mention that, because that needs to be part of the master plan. But that would all, it's probably one of these things that will come out during the discussion and the process. But we have some pretty extensive programs encouraging young women to participate in physical recreation, and we should continue that and make sure that's part of the master plan.
All right, so I have some thoughts on this, and I noted them down as I was reviewing the RFP. And Isabel, I'm going to email it to you, so don't feel like you need to write all of this down.
Okay,
but I'm going to go. I'm going to say a few things. One is that, and this is based on sort of 20 years of responding to RFPs like this and working on projects that are not too dissimilar from this. One thing that I've always found as a consultant is having a pre-bid meeting can be very beneficial for consultants and to help the city get good proposals. And in this era of Zoom, setting up a hour-long pre-bid meeting where consultants can ask questions, I think would ultimately benefit the city in terms of the quality of the proposals and the responsiveness of the proposals. When I heard the $50,000 budget, I almost fell out of my chair because I think that's not nearly enough. And I am concerned that with a budget so small that it's going to be difficult to attract good consultants, and it will be very difficult for consultants to do the work that is being asked from them, which would just end up being very frustrating for everyone. And so if it is really true that the city only has $50,000 for this, it will be particularly important, I think, to reach out to smaller consultants, sole practitioners, other firms that might have lower costs, because I suspect that some of the larger firms that have more experience with this sort of thing are not going to be interested in going after a project with this nature for that small of a budget. One thing that you may want to do in the RFP is to ask the consultants to differentiate between essential and optional tasks, that with a limited budget, there's maybe certain things that can be done, but not others. $50,000 would be a good cost for an outreach effort, not for doing anything else, from my experience. So having them sort of make sure that their proposal comes in very itemized in terms of here's the very basic that we could do for you for $50,000. And if we're able to obtain additional funding, here's some other things that we could possibly do for that amount.
Okay.
Another thought that I have is that I understand your desire to sort of leave the details a little bit open-ended because you're interested in the consultants sort of coming forward with their own ideas about how to address issues in Albany. I think we might have more success getting good proposals if we give a little bit more information on some of the key issues that we anticipate needing to be addressed through the update process. And some of those key issues could be sort of more general things like what Commissioner Sardinas mentioned about diversity, equity, inclusion being sort of an important value of the community that we're expecting to be addressed in the RFP. But it also could be more sort of specific things like, you know, the fact that, you know, we anticipate wanting to take a close look at the excess Caltrans right of way and ways that we could utilize that space as well, which to me seems like a $50,000 project in and of itself. So I think that it would be really helpful for the consultants to have a little better sense of what we see being the key issues, so that they can make sure that sort of if they need to bring in additional team members, that they can put together a qualified team to address all of those issues. I think you should put the budget in the RFP. If you don't put that in the RFP, then having more specificity about the tasks that you want completed is sort of an alternative to that. And let's see, I don't want to go on and on about this. I'll send this all to you. I mean, I do have some thoughts about this that sort of go beyond just what is in the RFP itself. You know, I think that there's a lot of interest in community participation in this effort, and questions about how that's going to occur. Sometimes for a master plan of this nature, you're going to have some sort of a citizens advisory committee. My sense is that you're not thinking about that, and that you're thinking about using the commission kind of more in that role. And if budget is limited, then that makes more sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think a consultant would likely have questions about that, whether there's going to be a citizens advisory commission, and if not, what the role of the commission is going to be. And that's the sort of thing you don't necessarily need to include in the RFP. But if you have sort of ideas about that and you can share that with the consultants as part of a pre-bid meeting, that could help with the proposals that we get. let's see, some additional thoughts, maybe not so much for the RFP, but it seems to me a really important thing is the demand and needs assessment for parks and recreational facilities in Albany, having a good sense of, okay, what do people want to do, and how does that match with the facilities that are available now and in the future? Seems to me like a particularly critical task, especially given what was mentioned previously by other commissioners, that, you know, we're a relatively dense community without a lot of space, and there's competing needs for our parks and recreational facilities now and in the future, and having a good sense of sort of the demand and need for these facilities and the gap that exists now in the future between those facilities and what we have available is going to be a really important task. Again, that in itself seems to be like more than a $50,000 task, but as being sort of particularly important. And then the last thing I'll say before I stop is that that especially if we have a limited budget, it's going to be really important to narrowly define what is going to be in this plan and what's not going to be in this plan. And I don't know how much of that you can do now or want to do now, but I expect that there's going to be a lot of things that we're just not going to be able to address if we want to do what we're doing well. You know, we may not be able to address things related to sensitive habitat protection and other resource protection issues that might have to fall outside of the scope. Things associated with the waterfront and the bulb, not sure to what extent that would be addressed as part of this project. So I think that either now during the RFP process or when we're further refining the scope with a selected consultant, I think, you know, very narrowly defining the scope of the project is going to be really important. And then the last thing I'll say is that, you know, implementation seems to be really, really important, both in terms of funding sources, as well as the process that occurs in order to implement and to put into effect sort of what we have fleshed out in this plan. And I would see that as being, you know, if it's possible, given the available budget, kind of an important part of this plan. So those are my thoughts as I was going through it this afternoon, and I wrote them all down. So I'll send you an email with them so you can have that, and you can do with it as you see fit.
Great. Thank you. And as for the budget, you know, this was appropriated as part of the 2-year budget, which was a year or two, almost 2 years ago. And it's actually recreation reserve funding that we're using. There is the possibility of adding more to the budget. So I'd be curious to know how much you think we should add. And because we could certainly request as part of the, you know, as part of the staff report going to council in December, we could ask them to appropriate additional funding to be able to meet the scope and of the plan that we want.
Yes. I have an existing client, the city of Benicia, that they just went through this process of hiring a consultant to update their parks master plan, and they would be happy to chat with you about sort of costs. And I think they're just about to select the consultant so they can share with you what they got. They got 8 proposals for their from their RFP, and so they would be a good resource. I mean, I think the best resource actually is to talk to the consultants themselves and sort of chat with them and say, okay, you know, here's sort of what we're thinking in terms of what we want to accomplish. What do you think that what do you think that would cost? And that would give you a really good sort of sense of what to expect.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
And if we can't get the funding all up front, is there a way to phase the process as funds become available to achieve the goals, the ultimate vision that you have?
Yeah, the recreation reserves are, you know, there's a policy for reserves, and we do have a certain amount of money appropriated in reserves, and of that, we've asked council to appropriate $50,000 for the plan. But if there's a need for further funding, we could certainly go back to council and ask to appropriate more of the reserves, because we don't have any other plans for those reserves right now, and those reserves are specifically for one-time expenses, and so this project would satisfy that criteria for the use of reserve.
I had another question. Does it make sense to put in to make the consultant aware of what kind of budget the city has for public works projects, or because I'd hate to get back. It kind of gets back to how things have changed here for us, is that we're not told how much money we have to work on things. So if they're not told how much money the city has to work on things, and they come back with all these pie in the sky, like, oh yeah, you could build like 3 more community centers over here, and you could do this, put in the pool on the Greenway, and all these different things. Is there like a dollar sign that they're told that to not suggest projects that just the city can't afford somehow?
I think that would be part of the process, with the consultant. As they do their research, they would ask those questions of staff. They would also balance that with the the requests from the community, and so I think it would be part of the process.
I just had some, so I actually really agree with you, Ben, about Commissioner Noble, about the cost. That's kind of why I was hoping you could do more outreach, because I typically, if a budget is too low, you just don't even propose on it as a consultant, because there's a lot of effort that goes into a proposal, or writing a proposal in the first place. So I would agree if we could increase that budget. And I know, Isabel, you have your constraints, so I'm not saying that you can do a miracle here, but if there's a way for you to add budget, I think we'll get a better product for sure. But the other thing I'd say is, in terms of priorities, I think even though you do want to keep it open, I do think we should really focus in on what we want from the product. And then also, here's just a sort of big picture question, the timing of it. I know, who knows when this shelter in place is going to be over, but it does seem like a real shame that all of our outreach is going to be over Zoom. And it would, normally the consultant would probably just have the public meet at that park, right? And so to the extent that we can't do any, even though outdoors would be much safer, but still, if we can't do any of that community engagement at the site, then I would really want to see them do some really creative visual exercises over Zoom, so that there's still some felt experience, that, just some way that the community can really use their visual, whatever, just some visual representation of what we might see.
I would even piggyback on that and kind of ask, is this the time to be doing this? I mean, with all that's going on, we don't know when it's going to end, and when it does end, it's going to be very different. I think maybe if we put it off a year, we're going to have it might be better timing, because demands might change. We don't really know. So maybe this isn't quite the time to. What's the hurry?
Well, I would add, though, that countering some of that, I see those concerns. Like it might be hard to meet at a park, but it does seem that there actually is a fair amount of engagement of speakers at our meetings. It seems like way more than we would normally have, and I think at some other city functions that at least it's the convenience of just doing it, going to a meeting from your own living room, is at least getting a certain segment of the community to a bunch of meetings that weren't previously going to them. So it's not all bad. Well,
I'm not really talking about the format of the meetings. I just mean people out using parks. The sports leagues aren't meeting right now. You know, all these things aren't, a lot of the normal use of the parks is not happening. So is this really the time for us to be trying to engage those communities, which are probably harder to get a hold of and aren't as active? Maybe it's more prudent to just wait until things are a little more lively and things are back to more active before we try to do this again.
So I do a lot of community engagement in my work, and I've actually found that I've had greater and broader and more diverse community participation in planning efforts during COVID than I did before. And I think part of it has to do with people being starved for any sort of activity beyond what they're accustomed to doing in their living room. And I think that there are very creative things that can be done to get broad, diverse, and meaningful public participation during COVID, and in a way requires you to think differently and more creatively about this. And so I guess my reaction to the question about timing is that, from my perspective, COVID and the pandemic would not in itself be a reason to postpone this effort.
Yeah, I'm going to try one more time. I'm not talking about the output or the outreach and the feedback itself. I'm talking about people using the parks so they know what they want. So they're experiencing it, they're seeing it, which can change. We don't know how it's going to change after the pandemic. We don't know the demand. There are people who haven't used the parks because their kids are too small. Now they're going to start using the parks. They don't know what to ask for. I'm saying wait until the parks are used again, it's active again, the sports leagues are working again, those people are engaged again, and then we'll reach out to them and they'll have more to say to us. You know, they don't have as much to say, no matter how we reach out.
I have to say, I really agree with that. I feel like it's one thing to go to attend a Zoom meeting because you have the time and be able to see visual representation. There's another thing to have just been at the park the other day doing that activity that you can then comment on. So I would agree with Commissioner Abbott that I think we really should be questioning it. Just,
Yeah, I think I would respectfully disagree on that. I think that our parks are being very well used these days, in a manner that's similar to how they were used before. And I don't think that we can put the world on hold until we have emerged from this. And I think that we could have a successful process, both in terms of engagement as well as addressing the issues in the community successfully during this time.
And if I may add, while the leagues cannot play games, they have been renting our fields for practices. So we've resumed, renting the fields for that purpose. And the playgrounds are open again to the public, and tennis courts are also open. So the parks are activated at almost, I would say, the same level as they were pre-COVID. Of course, in a very different way because of social distancing restrictions and the type of activities that can be done. But we've tried to resume as much of the regular activities as allowed by the shelter order.
Well, I would just say...
Go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I would just say I totally understand that there may be park usage, but I would agree again with what Commissioner Abbott said. It's just so different. And maybe we don't know. The problem is we don't know how long this is going to be, but I do feel like even just the fact that the schools aren't actively, the schools aren't open. So I think there's one thing about community engagement when there aren't people can participate. There's another, I can just imagine that you just don't even have those groups coming together right now to use the parks. Sorry, I'm not stop my comment there, but I guess I really think we should, I just don't want us to be making a decision going forward with something because it was already in the queue. I think we should be just pausing and making sure that this is the right move at this time. I just personally want to say from my standpoint, I was really excited about a master plan for the park. I really wanted to do this project. Like I was just like, yes, we should do it. It's so awesome that we have this in the plan and the budget. So I'm not saying I don't want to do it. I am really concerned about this just skewed place that we're in, this very different place that we're in right now. And or we're going to be doing something for 10 years time, and we're not getting sort of the input that we need or the thinking that we need because we're in such a weird period of time in history. So
that was perfect. Great.
So do any other commissioners have any thoughts on this before we?
Yeah, I would say I don't have, I mean, I have maybe mild concerns that people will have forgotten the before times when we do this, or that the parks will be used such radically different ways that, you know, but I think I have very few qualms at all about proceeding. And as far as the schools, I know I think all the Albany schools are supposed to even be open in February or something by then, and even the high school. So of course, who knows what's going to happen as the cases go up and down and all, but that's the current plan. So by the time the public meetings happen, it's going to be quite a while from now. And not that would be something that we'd have to have the schools open to do this. I don't have qualms about moving forward.
Commissioner Sardinas?
Isabel, how do we need, like, what are the needs for this plan and guiding our commission and helping us achieve our work plan? Like, what timing do we need for this to be adopted for us to continue working towards specific goals? I think that would help me determine whether or not it makes sense to go forward this year, which is actually what I think, or put a pause on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think for the next work plan, a major part will be your involvement as a commission in the in the planning process for this plan, and active participation with the consultant to develop the plan. And then once it's adopted, then whatever comes up at the surface, where like Mark always says, when we have the funding piece and the project and things just come up and they match and we're able to include in the CIP, then those would be the projects that would be part of your work plan. So the work plan can always be modified in mid-year or at midterm if the master plan, let's say, is adopted at the end of fall 2021, and you've already have a work plan approved by council before that. We can certainly modify that work plan to include new items that come up as part of the master plan process. So it's not stuck in stone, right? Like there's flexibility there.
So I guess maybe to rephrase my question, like, why now? Like, why is this something that we're putting together and planning now? How eminent are the needs? And forgive me, it's been a while since I reviewed the master plan. I think I reviewed it when I first became a commissioner, and I should probably make that an annual thing. But I just want to understand kind of the gap between where we are and where we hope to be, and the need for doing it sooner than later.
Well, I think if you read the current master plan, you'll find that a lot of the goals and objectives have been attained. The city has changed since 2004. There's, and I've mentioned that before, there's the interest in Caltrans property, there's Pierce Street Park. You've had different groups come in, advocating for new activities in our parks, which, we've, that need to be addressed in a master plan. So there's different reasons to move forward. As part of your work plan, I think the work plan item was to identify funding, which we've done. So, there's no next step after that. It's just that because of the community involvement and and the request that the commission has gotten over the last year. It just felt like the starting a master plan process was probably the next best step to also be able to, for the commission and the community to prioritize what is the next project instead of operating in a vacuum. It's like, we have some groups who want something at Ocean View and we want another group who wants something there, but we don't have a plan right now that outlines the big picture for the entire city. So I think there's a need for that, to be able to make those decisions and make these decisions anchored into an overall plan for the city.
So to me, that sounds like a really strong argument for prioritizing this sooner than later, because I have more faith in people that they do understand how they use parks, and how I certainly sit there and fantasize all the time about what I wish I could be doing now that playgrounds are open. It's just a little better, but I don't think that people are lacking in imagination. And I personally think we talk a lot about the master street tree plan, which is something I'd like to do to help us frame our conversations. And so I think that this similarly is something that we need to be able to help guide us moving forward. And so I would like to see it go on the timeline that's been proposed.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on this timing issue or anything else related to this RFP before we conclude this discussion? No. So yeah, I think that I'll say again that I think it would be a mistake to delay this process. My experience over the last couple of years on this commission is that to a certain extent we've been flying blind without a clear sort of prioritization of the city's sort of parks and recreation needs now and in the future, and we need that community-based vision and priority and framework for us to operate into the future. And my personal belief is that the pandemic situation is not going to interfere with our ability to get that from the community in a meaningful way. So I think for that reason, I'm supportive of us moving forward with this process and the timeline that we currently have. Okay.
I'll just disagree. We'll just do that. I'll just disagree. We're done.
All right. So with that, what's left? Future agenda items. This is the time for commissioners to announce requests for future agenda items. Do any commissioners have requests for additional agenda items, future agenda items?
I didn't, but I did want to thank Todd for a previous agenda item, which was he represented us before the city council a few weeks ago about pickleball courts, and I appreciated his explain his abilities to explain all of that to the city council and answer questions, and represented us well. Thank you, Todd.
Okay, so with that, our next meeting is December 10th at 7 p.m. So we will see everybody then. So the meeting is adjourned. Stay safe. We look forward to seeing you again next month. Good night, everyone.
Bye, all. Good night.